They say life can change in a single heartbeat. I always thought that was just something people said until our 12th anniversary dinner turned my world upside down. My name is Michael Sullivan. I'm a construction project manager with a degree in civil engineering and a talent for solving problems. For 12 years, I'd been married to Sarah, and for most of those years, I truly believed she loved me. I reserved a table at Bellini's, the same Italian restaurant where I'd proposed to her back when we were both still paying off student loans. White tablecloths, candlelight, soft piano music in the background. Sarah always loved that place. I wore the blue button-down she once said brought out my eyes, and she wore a black dress that still made heads turn when we walked in. Not bad for pushing 40, she smiled, reaching for my hand across the table. I laughed. Her quick wit was one of the things that first drew me to her. The evening seemed perfect. Steak for me, salmon for her, a bottle of Cabernet we discovered on our 10th anniversary. Just before dessert arrived, I made what I now recognize as a critical mistake. I stood up, kissed her cheek, and told her I was going to settle the bill. Want to surprise you, I explained. Though the truth was, I'd arranged with our waiter to include a special note on the receipt. Here's to many more. I thought it might make her smile. I wish I'd stayed in my seat. On my way back from the register, I slowed near booth 7, which was directly behind ours, waiting for our server to bring the signed copy of the bill. That's when I heard her laugh, not the soft chuckle she usually gave me. This was different, fuller, more uninhibited, and unmistakably flirtatious. Then came the words that stopped me cold. If he ever found out, I think he'd just quietly leave. He's not the type to make a scene. He'd just disappear. Silence. Then more laughter. Not just hers, but a man's. Confident. Familiar. That's what makes it so easy, babe. You married a pushover, not a fighter. I froze. My mind raced, telling me I'd misunderstood, that she was joking, that this was about something else entirely, that she wasn't talking about me. But then she said, casual as ordering another glass of wine, "This will be the last anniversary I have to pretend through." Something inside me shattered completely. I didn't return to the table immediately. I stood there numb, staring at the flickering candle in the window reflection. Then I took a deep breath, turned slowly, and walked back as if I'd heard nothing. Sarah was mid-sip when I sat down. "Everything okay?" she asked with that same charming smile. "Perfect," I replied. I lied. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask. I didn't cry. Not that night. I watched her finish her tiramisu. I watched her thank the server. I watched her fix her lipstick in the mirror by the door. The entire time I wondered who he was. I replayed the voice, the laugh, the tone. I knew it wasn't a stranger. That voice had history. My mind cycled through our friends, neighbors, colleagues. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat in our bathroom for 3 hours, just sitting on the cold tile floor, phone in hand, trying to decide if I wanted to know the truth or if I already did. I decided I would find out everything, not with drama, not with shouting, with evidence. The next morning was a masterclass in pretending. Sarah hummed in the kitchen like nothing had happened, made coffee, toasted sourdough, and asked if I wanted eggs. I looked at her like she was a stranger wearing my wife's face. "Running late for the site meeting," I lied, and left 20 minutes earlier than necessary. I sat in my truck around the corner, gripping the steering wheel, pulse pounding in my throat. I wasn't just angry, I was unraveling, but not in the way you might expect. I didn't want revenge or drama. I wanted answers. That's when I remembered Ryan. We'd been friends since college, and now he ran an IT security company that serviced half the businesses in town. The guy could troubleshoot anything with a circuit board. I called him and suggested lunch, saying I needed to ask about something personal. "Sure thing," he said, and we met at a diner halfway between our offices. "I think Sarah's cheating. I need proof," I said without preamble. Ryan didn't ask many questions. He just nodded and said, "Digital or physical evidence?" "Both," I replied, "but nothing illegal. I'm not trying to end up in jail. I just want to know the truth." He nodded, thoughtful. I can help with that. That afternoon, I handed him one of our old tablets and a spare phone I'd kept after upgrading. Ryan said he could install tracking software, connect the devices so I could monitor certain messages, calls, and locations without her knowing. I hesitated for a second. This felt like crossing a line, but then I remembered her words. This will be the last anniversary I have to pretend through. That wasn't love. That wasn't even basic decency. By the weekend, I had the tools I needed. I didn't confront her. I just watched. And what I started seeing made my stomach turn. It began with subtle things. Messages at odd hours to a contact saved as work project, calendar entries for fake yoga classes, a location ping at the Westbrook Hotel downtown on a Thursday afternoon. But then came the first real gut punch, a forwarded email with attached receipts for 2 weekend packages at a mountain resort I'd never even heard of, billed to her personal credit card. One of the names on the receipt, Brian Lawson. That name hit me like a sledgehammer. Brian was my former boss at Sullivan Construction before I started my own firm. We'd worked together for 4 years. I'd helped him through his divorce. We'd done barbecues, football games. He'd sat at my dinner table countless times. And he was the man in booth 7. The voice finally made sense. Confident, familiar, with that slight condescending edge. The confirmation hit me during Wednesday's project meeting. Brian walked in late, all smiles and handshakes with the investors. He clapped my shoulder like we were still buddies and asked about Sarah like he hadn't seen her naked less than 24 hours earlier. How's the wife? Still doing that yoga thing? He asked with a straight face that deserved an Oscar. Better than ever, I replied, matching his performance. I watched him closely, the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth, the way his eyes never quite met mine. In construction, I'd learned to spot hairline foundation cracks before they became structural failures. People weren't much different. We should do dinner soon, he said. It's been too long. I nodded. Absolutely. I'll check Sarah's schedule. He gave that practiced laugh, the one I now recognized from booth 7. The sound made my skin crawl. I sat on the edge of our bed that night and watched Sarah scrolling through her phone, smiling at something on the screen. I thought about grabbing the phone from her hands, but I didn't. I wasn't going to react. I was going to plan. So I began my own quiet campaign, methodical, careful. I created a private folder in the cloud and named it Something Boring, Tax Paperwork 2023. In it, I saved screenshots of messages, location data, email trails, and eventually photos. I didn't stop at digital evidence. Ryan helped me install a small camera in Sarah's car and another one in the home office where she often took private client calls. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. I was becoming someone calculating, patient, dangerous even. But there was worse to come. 3 weeks into my quiet investigation, Sarah came home visibly different. Her smile was wider. She hummed while making dinner, kissed my cheek before heading upstairs. Later that night, while she showered, a new message came through from Brian. Same hotel Tuesday, 2 p.m. I'll bring the wine this time. You bring that black dress. Unless your husband has finally caught on, she replied 3 minutes later while drying her hair. He has no idea. He never does. I could disappear for a week and he'd think I was at a business conference. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the screen, burning every word into my memory. He has no idea. She had no clue that I was about to change everything. The days leading up to Tuesday felt like walking barefoot on broken glass. Every second silent, sharp, and agonizing. I acted normal, smiled when needed, nodded during conversations, slept beside her like everything was fine. But inside, I was rehearsing every detail of what I needed to do. Ryan had offered to follow her that Tuesday. I'll keep my distance. Get what you need. You don't have to see it yourself, Mike, he said, like he was doing me a favor. But I declined. I needed to see. Not because I'm a masochist, but because this wasn't just suspicion anymore. I wasn't chasing shadows. I was documenting reality, and if I didn't face it now, it would haunt me forever. The morning before I caught them, I stood at the Henderson project site, calmly resolving a crisis that would have sent most project managers into a tailspin. The concrete supplier had delivered the wrong mix specification, and the foundation crew was already on site. "This is why I keep detailed records of every interaction," I told my assistant while pulling up the original order confirmation on my tablet. "Always document everything. Always have a backup plan." 4 hours and several heated calls later, I had new concrete trucks rolling in with the correct mix, minimal delay costs, and a supplier offering 15% off our next 3 orders. My foreman shook his head in amazement. "How do you stay so cool when everything's falling apart?" I just shrugged. "When things get tough, focus on the solution, not the problem." Little did I know I'd be applying that same approach to my marriage in less than 8 hours. Tuesday arrived with perfect weather, as if the universe was mocking me. Sarah left home at 11:20 a.m., dressed in the same black dress she wore to our anniversary dinner. She kissed me on the cheek and said she had a client meeting, followed by a professional development workshop. I just nodded and handed her a travel mug of coffee, one I'd slipped a GPS tracker into the bottom of. She wouldn't notice. She never did. She always underestimated how much attention I paid to details. I waited 15 minutes, grabbed my camera, and followed the GPS signal from a rental car I'd picked up the day before. My hands didn't shake. My breathing was steady. Maybe I'd gone numb, or maybe I'd finally become what she expected me to be. The man who knew and said nothing. She didn't go to any client meeting. She drove straight to the Westbrook, a mid-tier boutique hotel about 30 minutes from our neighborhood. Not fancy, not sleazy, just forgettable. The kind of place that doesn't ask questions and takes cash. I parked across the street behind a delivery truck and watched her step out of the car with her phone in hand and a smile on her lips. A smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. She didn't wait long. 5 minutes later, Brian's Audi pulled up. He didn't even park properly, just pulled into a loading zone, jumped out in jeans and a blazer, and kissed her right on the mouth. They laughed like teenagers sneaking out of class. I took photos, videos, high-resolution shots. No doubts, no questions. They walked inside arm in arm. She looked back once, maybe out of habit, but I ducked just enough behind the truck's side mirror to avoid being seen. She didn't spot me, of course. I was invisible to her now, had been for a long time. They stayed inside for over 2 hours. I didn't move, didn't eat. Just sat there listening to the street noise, wondering how many client meetings, yoga sessions, and networking events had been elaborate lies to cover this betrayal. And what hurt most wasn't even the physical cheating. It was that she laughed with him, that her whole body seemed lighter in his presence. She was a different woman with him, more alive, more genuine, more herself. Around 2:40 p.m. they emerged. Her hair was disheveled, her lipstick gone, but she looked pleased. He patted her rear as she got in her car. She didn't even flinch. She just giggled and told him to message her later when he was alone. Then they drove off in separate directions like it was nothing. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. I had what I needed. That night she came home around 6:01 p.m. with takeout bags. "Too tired to cook," she said with a manufactured yawn. That workshop was exhausting. I sat across from her, eating pad thai while wondering if she'd washed him off her skin or just covered it with perfume. She told me about her day, how the client was difficult, how the speaker at the workshop had a monotone voice and outdated slides. She was good. I almost believed her. Almost. But in the middle of her story, I interrupted casually. "What's the Westbrook like inside?" She blinked once, a little too long. Her smile faltered but quickly recovered. "Huh? Saw a receipt in your car," I lied, "from the Westbrook Hotel. Just curious." "Oh, that? Yeah, we had lunch there after the workshop. The conference room was packed." She shrugged. Food was overpriced and mediocre. Quick, confident, almost seamless. But not quite, because her eyes had given her away. Sarah had forgotten who I really was. She thought I was a pushover. She hadn't yet realized that I had teeth, and I wasn't afraid to use them. The night after I saw her with Brian, something inside me shifted. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing my teeth, looking at the man staring back. For years, Sarah had told me I was too easygoing, too accommodating, too conflict avoidant. I thought that was love, the kind that doesn't make waves, that listens, that compromises. But looking into my own eyes that night, I didn't see a man built for endless compromise anymore. I saw a man finding his edge. The next day I called in sick. I needed time, not to wallow, but to plan. I laid out every piece of evidence I had so far: texts, location records, videos, audio recordings, photos of them at the hotel, phone logs, financial statements. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was a documented affair. Brian Lawson, my former boss, was systematically taking over my life from the inside out. But the real betrayal wasn't just his. Sarah had given him access, repeatedly, willingly. That's when I realized something. This wasn't just about cheating. It was a long-term deception, financially, emotionally, physically. And worse, she was preparing for something. Those resort receipts. The way she suddenly started asking casual questions like, "Have you ever thought about downsizing?" Or, "What would you do if you had a fresh start somewhere else?" These weren't innocent questions. They were trial balloons for a future where I didn't exist. So I started thinking 2 steps ahead. I went to the bank and checked our joint account balances. I printed every statement. Then I quietly opened a new private checking account under my name only and transferred half of our liquid assets. Nothing illegal, just fair. I didn't touch the mortgage or retirement accounts, just the cash. Enough to make her nervous, but not enough to trigger an immediate confrontation. I also called a divorce attorney, not to file, not yet, but to understand my position. Her name was Jennifer Martinez. She was sharp, direct, and didn't sugarcoat anything. With evidence this strong of both adultery and financial deception, you're in a strong position, she told me. But don't rush. Let her give you more rope. I remember that phrase, let her give you more rope. It stuck with me. So I waited. Sarah grew bolder. She started staying out late with colleagues. She began locking her phone when she never used to. She giggled at texts she didn't show me. She even started criticizing me more openly. Comments about how I was too predictable lately, how I seemed distracted, how she felt like we were drifting apart. I agreed with her every time. "Maybe you're right," I said once, just to see how she'd react. She smiled like I was making it easier for her. The next evening, I caught her leaving the bedroom while texting. I followed quietly just out of her line of sight. She went into the guest room, closed the door, and took a call. Ryan's microphone in the hallway smoke detector caught it clearly. "I told you he won't fight for it. He's not built that way." Then laughter, hers and Brian's. "He's like a golden retriever. He'll just hang his head and walk away." I stopped the recording and stared at the screen. Golden retriever. Hang his head. Walk away. That was how she saw me, but I wasn't done yet. Later that night, after she fell asleep, I checked her purse. She never changed her phone passcode. Same 4 digits as her birthday. I opened her phone and looked through her notes app. There it was, a drafted message to Brian. "If I move in with you once everything's settled, will your kids hate me? I'm trying to imagine what our life would look like. Just us. I'm ready to leave all this behind." I stared at it for a full minute. She had already left me in her mind. She was just working out the details. She had no idea I was working out details too. But mine weren't about escape. They were about showing her exactly who I really was, right before I disappeared on my terms, not hers. Because Sarah thought I'd leave quietly. She had no idea how loud silence could be. If someone had asked Sarah back then how our marriage was going, I'm sure she would have said it was fading, that I seemed distant, that I wasn't engaged anymore, and she would have been right. Except she thought it was because I was slipping away. What she didn't realize was that I was methodically disentangling myself from our life together, piece by piece. I started with the small things. I removed old photos of us from my social media. Just a few at first, so it wouldn't raise flags. I stopped tagging her in posts. I deleted our anniversary date from my online profiles. Then I backed up all of our financial records, insurance policies, tax documents, and property paperwork to a secure drive. Anything that had both our names on it, I made a digital copy and in most cases, quietly filed for my removal. I also hired an estate attorney and updated my will. The old version left everything to Sarah. The new one didn't mention her once. She noticed none of it. She was too busy maintaining her double life. One Friday, she told me she'd be out of town for a weekend leadership retreat in Chicago. I knew it was a lie as soon as she said it. There was no conference schedule, no mention of which colleagues would be there, no details about the sessions. But I smiled and nodded and said, "That's great. You deserve the professional development." After she left, I checked her location. She was at a lake house 2 hours outside the city. One Brian Lawson had gotten in his divorce settlement, a private little hideaway with no nosy neighbors. I didn't drive out there. I didn't need more pictures. I already had enough. Instead, I spent that weekend erasing her from my future. I closed our joint credit cards and ordered replacements under my name only. I boxed up the meaningful items, wedding album, anniversary cards, the souvenirs from our honeymoon in Hawaii, and moved them to a storage unit rented under my business name. I created a new email address, set up a new phone line, and consolidated all my evidence into a single folder labeled simply Truth. Then I wrote her a letter, 3 pages. I didn't pour my heart out. I didn't try to win her back. I just listed what I'd seen, what I knew, what she'd said when she thought I wasn't listening. I documented the dates, the places, the moments, and at the end I wrote one line that I underlined 3 times. "You didn't lose me because you cheated. You lost me because you thought I was too weak to notice." Sunday night, she returned tanned, relaxed, with a fresh manicure. She acted like nothing had happened, told me the retreat was really productive, and asked if I'd missed her. I said I had. She smiled, satisfied with the lie. She thought it worked, but something changed in her after that. I think she could sense it, not in what I said, but in what I didn't. I stopped initiating conversations. I stopped sharing my thoughts. I stopped reacting to her. She noticed. One night, while we sat on the couch watching some home renovation show, she asked, "Is everything okay with us?" I paused, turned to her slowly. "Why wouldn't it be?" She hesitated, her eyes searching mine for a clue. But I'd learned to control my expressions. I blinked twice, no emotion, just stillness. "I don't know," she said. "You seem different." I nodded and said, "Just tired, probably." She nodded too, but she didn't believe it. The next few days were quiet. She started being unusually attentive, making my favorite breakfast, asking about my projects, even suggesting we plan a weekend away together. I said it sounded nice. She smiled again, but behind her smile I saw it, uncertainty, maybe even a flash of guilt, fear, a crack in her confidence. She thought she was still in control, but what she didn't know was that I'd already booked a one-way flight, found a temporary apartment in another state, transferred my essential files, talked to my clients about remote management, and set up mail forwarding to a secure P.O. box. Everything was ready. All I had to do was wait for the right moment, and it came the day she made the mistake of inviting Brian over while she thought I was at a job site out of town. She didn't know I'd installed motion sensors in our backyard as security upgrades weeks earlier. She didn't know I got the alert on my phone while sitting in a coffee shop 10 blocks away. She didn't know that as they laughed in my living room, I was already on my way home. And she definitely didn't know I had my phone recording video when I walked through the front door. I don't think Sarah even heard me come in. Maybe it was the music playing in the background. Maybe she was too busy laughing at something Brian had whispered while pouring bourbon into my favorite glass. Or maybe, and this is what I believe, she'd grown so confident in her lies that the possibility of me catching them simply never crossed her mind. The moment froze when I stepped into the living room. I'll never forget how quickly the silence fell. Brian saw me first. His smile dropped so fast it was almost comical. Sarah, facing away toward the fireplace, turned with laughter still on her lips. When she saw me, her expression changed in stages. Confusion, fear, calculation. Then came the performance. "Mike, what?" "What are you doing home?" she asked, stepping toward me like I might actually buy the act. "I live here," I said evenly. "Or did you forget that part?" Brian stood up, eyes darting around the room, probably looking for the quickest exit. His hands were visibly shaking. I never realized how pathetic he was until that moment, standing in another man's house, drinking another man's whiskey. Sarah tried again. "I thought you were at the Henderson site until tonight." "I was," I replied. "Plans changed." I could have yelled. I could have thrown him out, broken furniture, called him every name in the book, threatened them both, cried, lost control. But instead, I placed my phone on the coffee table and hit play. The TV came to life. I'd connected my phone wirelessly. The screen showed footage of Sarah and Brian entering our house an hour earlier. Sarah pulling him in by his tie. Sarah laughing as she took his jacket. Brian kissing her neck. Sarah leading him toward our living room like they'd done this a dozen times before. I let it play without saying a word. Sarah froze. Brian looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. When the video ended, I turned off the TV and looked directly at Sarah. "I know everything. I've known for weeks. This," I gestured around the room, "was just the final confirmation." Sarah opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Brian edged toward the door. "Don't worry about rushing off," I told him. "You can stay or go. Doesn't matter to me. Your part in this is already over." He bolted. Didn't even grab his jacket. Left it draped over my couch. The front door slammed behind him. Sarah slowly sank onto the edge of the sofa, like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just stared at the floor. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Don't say anything," I replied. "I'm not here for explanations. I just wanted you to see the truth before I go." "Go where?" Her voice cracked. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out an envelope, and placed it on the table next to Brian's half-empty glass. Inside were the divorce papers, copies of the evidence, a detailed breakdown of how I'd already separated our finances, and the letter I'd written, 3 pages explaining everything she thought I was too blind to see. "I won't be staying here tonight, and I won't be coming back tomorrow. I've already talked to a lawyer. Everything you need to know is in there." She didn't touch the envelope. Her hands just rested limply in her lap, like she couldn't process what was happening. I stood there for one more second, long enough to memorize the moment when she finally realized she'd lost everything. Not just me, but the life she thought she could manipulate, the version of me she thought she had all figured out. Then I turned and walked out. I didn't take much, just a duffel bag with essentials and a folder of important documents. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even lock it. Let her sit with the silence. That night I checked into a decent hotel an hour away, not because I needed distance, but because I needed to feel what freedom actually felt like. And for the first time in years, I slept. Not just doze, slept. Not the kind where your mind keeps racing even while your body rests. I mean real, peaceful, dreamless sleep. Because she no longer had a place in my future, and she finally knew it. The morning after I left, I woke up in a hotel room that smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and fresh coffee. Sunlight came through the blinds in a way I hadn't noticed in years. Clean, direct, and unburdened by the weight of pretending. There were no footsteps in the hallway, no passive-aggressive sighs from the kitchen, no questions about my plans for the day. Just quiet. Just me. It was a strange kind of peace. Not exactly happy, not exactly sad, just clean, like the air after a thunderstorm. I checked my phone, half expecting a flood of missed calls and desperate messages, but there were only 3 texts. The first, "Michael, where are you?" The second, "Michael, we need to talk. Please." The third came around 3 a.m. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I made a mistake. Please come home." I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I went for a walk, just around the block. I passed a bakery, a bookstore, a pet groomer. Life was happening all around. People drinking coffee, laughing on phones, walking dogs, reading newspapers. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe I still had a place in it all. Not as a husband, not as someone's backup plan, just as myself. Around noon, I stopped at a quiet cafe and pulled out my laptop. I logged into my cloud storage, the one with all the evidence, and made one final backup to a secure drive. Then I deleted everything from my phone and tablet. I didn't want to carry it anymore. That chapter was documented, sealed, and finished. She could deny it all she wanted, but the truth didn't need my help anymore. That afternoon, I met with my divorce attorney in person for the first time. Jennifer had this way of making everything feel like a business transaction, even the painful parts. We finalized the next steps. Sarah would be served officially within 48 hours. All assets had been divided fairly, and my relocation was already in progress. She asked if I wanted to include the photos and videos in the filing. No, I said. She knows what she did. I don't need a judge to see it too. Classy move, Jennifer said. Most people don't handle it this way. I didn't feel classy. I felt hollow, but I also felt proud. 2 days later, I got confirmation that Sarah had been served. According to the courier, she didn't say a word when she accepted the envelope, just nodded and closed the door. Then the phone calls started, dozens of them. She cycled through all the predictable stages: panic, anger, guilt, bargaining. One voicemail said she missed me. Another accused me of being manipulative for not giving her a chance to explain. One even claimed she was just confused and never meant to hurt me. But every message had the same undertone. She wasn't sorry she did it. She was sorry she got caught. The most surreal call came from Brian. Yes, he actually called me. He left a voicemail that started with, "Look, man, I know you're probably pissed off." Then he went on to explain that he and Sarah had a real connection and that he hoped we could all be adults about this. He sounded nervous, like he thought I might show up at his office with a baseball bat. Maybe that's what he expected. Maybe that's what he would have done in my place. But I didn't return his call either. You see, the real revenge wasn't in making a scene or publicly humiliating them. The real revenge was letting them end up together. Two selfish people built on lies, always looking over their shoulders, wondering when the other shoe would drop. Meanwhile, I was already gone. I signed a lease on an apartment in a coastal town I'd always wanted to live in. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom with a view of the water. I changed my phone number, took on new construction projects that I could manage remotely, and adopted a rescue dog named Cooper, who didn't care about my past or what I'd lost. He just cared that I showed up and threw the ball when he dropped it at my feet. One afternoon, maybe 2 weeks after everything, I sat on a bench by the shore watching Cooper chase seagulls. I had a coffee in one hand and a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I didn't need closure from Sarah. I didn't need her to beg or apologize or understand what she destroyed. The truth was, I'd already won. I got out. I didn't lose myself to bitterness. I didn't let her define my future. And as far as she knew, I vanished. But I wasn't gone. I was just starting over. A month passed, then two. By the third, I'd stopped checking my old email completely. The number was disconnected. The storage unit was emptied. I sold the truck we'd co-signed for, updated my driver's license, and legally changed my address. On paper and in real life, Sarah no longer existed next to my name. But strangely, I didn't feel like a man who had just lost everything. I felt like a man who had finally put down something toxic he'd been carrying for too long. One quiet Sunday morning, I woke up before sunrise. Cooper was curled up at the foot of the bed, snoring softly. Outside, the ocean was calm. I made coffee, grabbed a notebook, and sat by the open window. The air smelled like salt and pine trees. I hadn't written anything in years, just job estimates and material lists. But that morning, words came easily. Not about her, not about betrayal, but about what comes next. I made a list. Not goals exactly, not a bucket list. Just simple things I wanted for myself. Read books for pleasure again. Talk to people without second-guessing everything. Wake up without checking someone else's mood first. Laugh without worrying if it's too loud. Trust someone again, but only when I'm ready. I looked at that last one for a while. The old me would have crossed it out, said something cynical about never making that mistake again. But not now. I didn't need it to happen next week or next year. I just wanted to believe that when the right person came along, I'd be ready. Not broken, not suspicious of everything. Just me, honest and present. And I wasn't rushing toward it. That was the difference. I started seeing a counselor, not because I was falling apart, but because I wanted to understand why I stayed so long with someone who clearly didn't value me. My counselor said something that hit home. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't walking away. It's not running back when they realize what they've lost. And I didn't run back, not even once. One evening, about 4 months after leaving, I met someone new. Her name was Claire. She was at the same dog beach, throwing a frisbee for her golden retriever, and Cooper ran straight to her like they were old friends. We laughed, talked, nothing forced, no games or false fronts, just two people standing in the fading sunlight having a real conversation. Claire and I ended up walking our dogs together as the sun set. When she mentioned she restored old buildings for a living, I couldn't help but laugh. "What's funny about saving history?" she asked, smiling. "Nothing. I build new structures. You restore old ones. There's symmetry there." As Cooper and her dog Daisy raced along the shoreline, Claire told me about a 1920s theater she was currently bringing back to life. Everyone wanted to demolish it, but I could see the good bones underneath all that damage. Her words struck me. Good bones. The foundation that remains when everything else falls away. Sometimes, I said, you have to tear everything down to remember what's worth rebuilding. She glanced at me curiously. That sounds like a story. Maybe someday, I replied. For the first time in years, someday felt like a promise rather than an evasion. We exchanged numbers before parting ways. No pressure, no expectations, just possibility. And for now, that was enough. I didn't tell her my story, not yet. But I smiled when I realized something halfway through our talk. I wasn't thinking about Sarah, not even a little bit. And in that moment, I knew I had truly escaped, not just physically, but emotionally. Because healing isn't some dramatic movie moment with swelling music in the background. Sometimes healing is just standing on a beach, watching your dog play with someone else's, and realizing you feel light again, free, whole. So if you're reading this, whether you've been betrayed, abandoned, or left behind, just know that you can walk away with your dignity intact. You can survive without revenge, without bitterness, without becoming someone you don't recognize. And maybe, just maybe, you'll sit on your own bench someday, look out at the world and realize the life you thought was over was just beginning.